Please listen carefully.
Hi, this is Paul Frields from Practical Bass, and we are going to start this episode just a little bit differently than normal. This is actually the second part of a two-part podcast on recording those quick and dirty demos with your band. As we went along in the last episode, we realized that we were kind of getting to the point where we were getting out of sort of the quick and dirty land and more into doing sophisticated recording. So Dave and I talk a little bit about a few ways to do that. And we're also going to give you some technical tips, whether you're doing simple demo recording or more complex recording, how you can make sure that the signal and the quality of what you're doing makes it to your computer or tape. So without further ado, we're going to go ahead and just plunge right in. So I hope you enjoy this episode. Stay tuned at the end and we'll tell you how you can subscribe and share this with other folks and where you can find us for feedback. And with no further ado, here's us. Enjoy. So the thing about, getting into this, over this threshold.
Yeah.
Is that you do want to know a couple things about mics. Unfortunately, we talked about them a little bit already, which is, the kind of mics that you're using.
Yep.
And I would say the main thing is just to be choosy about not just, where you put a mic, but also, the kind of mic that you use. And that doesn't mean that you got to go spend $1 billion zillion on microphones, which of course you can.
You can.
That is a whole thing unto itself.
Totally different podcast.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. That we could do a whole
totally
podcast
different problem
on mic choices. but here's the thing. I would say if you're going to do some demo recordings of your band, this is probably where you want, I would say, at least one condenser mic.
Yeah.
Right? One of these large diaphragm condenser mics.
Yeah.
And then I would say, 3 to 4 dynamic microphones, right? You probably want one for your, for a guitar, and you're going to want one for voices.
Right.
There are different ways you could do this too, though, right? Like you can be inventive about it. Say you don't have a microphone, you don't have enough microphones for everybody to be able to, sing into or whatever. Like you can, double up, like have a microphone that, all the singers kind of gather around and sing into in order to make that work.
That's right.
There's really no hard and fast rule for how you do this. The only thing that I would say is that if you need to pick up a lot of things that are not close to the microphone, that's when you need a condenser. And if you want to have sound for something that's at one point and you want to get just that sound and nothing else, that's when you probably want a dynamic microphone.
Right. Yeah.
And then you could just mix and match essentially, right?
Yeah. And we're assuming, if you're looking to do this for purposes of recording a demo so that you could play live, then hopefully if your singers are going to have mics.
Yeah.
So everyone should be able to bring whatever their tool is, right, that they need for the gig. They'll have those pieces. So really when you start to look at where's, what's the total cost going to look like? You've got whatever that device is, whatever your, wherever your inputs are, that interface, that's a big cost. And then you have, usually it's the condenser, mics, which can range. You can get cheap ones from like $30, $40, but I think usually once you get into the $75 to $100 price range.
They're definitely like those imports, in between $100 and $200, there are some really decent, Chinese condensers out there. In fact, we're using them right now here in the studio. We've got, I think the one that you're using, I think I paid maybe $150. I did get a really good deal on it. It was like a warehouse deal.
It's gold.
Well, yeah, it looks like it, right? But
oh, it's not real gold?
No, it's not. Yeah, so if you're thinking about selling that mic for,
I was only doing this podcast because I thought I was on a gold mic.
Because you're on a gold mic. You are the gold
Wait a
standard
second.
of
This
podcasters.
is a fraud. This is a setup.
What sort of second-rate place have you brought me to? Yeah, and then I've got this one in front of me, which I think I spent like $250 on or something like that.
Yeah.
But there's a whole range of them out there, and you don't have to spend huge amounts of money. I mean, I've seen MXLs are you can get those a lot of times for under $100.
Yeah.
So you're not talking about a big outlay. Oh, and I was going to say, there's one more thing that occurred to me. If you've got everybody kind of bringing their mic, and you guys have a way of doing a PA when you're doing practice or whatever.
Right.
Here's something that's like a cheap and easy trick, and you just need, essentially like one extra mic. Just take your one mic and kind of stick it out where it's going to hear the PA speaker, right?
Right.
Now all your vocalists are going in there. You get all the vocals on
on
one channel.
Yeah.
So if you don't have enough, say you've got an audio interface, but you only got, maybe 2 or 3 or 4 channels on it.
Right.
That's a way to kind of get everybody down to one and only use one channel out of it, so that you've got another one for a drum, and you've got another one for the bass, and another one for the guitar.
Good call. Yeah.
So there are ways like you kind of just, get inventive. Think about how you could capture the sound differently than you're doing.
Yeah.
So these are kind of the simple ways, I guess. The next frontier is sort of, where do you cross the line from, a small interface or whatever to like the next level? Like you really want to, you want to go whole hog and say, we're going to do this practically like it's practically like a live album or something.
Right.
So that
where is that? I don't know where that line. You need to tell me.
I don't know. Like it's a hazy area, right? Like it's a gray area. When do you cross that line? I mean, and I say it probably all depends on what the approach is. So, I mean, I did one of these not too long ago with one of my bands. And it was a lot of fun. We really, really enjoyed it. We used, we determined that because the place that we were recording in, it was not going to be easy to get around the fact that the drums were going to overwhelm everything in the room. And it was more of a situation where, it wasn't like, aggressive, loud music. It was, fairly sensitive, and, you're kind of aiming for a certain kind of vibe and tone.
Right.
And we didn't want to, have that, that problem with the drums kind of overwhelming everything.
Yeah.
So what we ended up doing, this was interesting, is we used a set of electronic drums as triggers for drum sounds in the computer that we were recording into. This is kind of, I guess this is like, getting kind of next level, because now you're sort of crossing the bounds from, to where it looks more like a studio type of thing. And, it was a real performance. So, we didn't, it wasn't like hitting a button on a drum machine and it just goes like, doot, 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 doot. It was like,
which could be cool too, actually.
The drummer was, he was playing a set with real triggers and whatnot. And we ran a click to him so that, he would have something to like stay on. And so that's how he got his sound. As a bass player, I just, took a DI line that went in through another channel. For the guitar, we put the guitar amps under big heavy blankets, like bunches of them, and then hung little mics in front of them. And we also ran the click because, of course, everyone was going to have this issue of like, we need to be able to hear what the drums are doing or whatever. So we actually ran the click into a PA speaker that was in the room.
Oh, no kidding.
And I'm not exactly sure why we did this. I think what I remember is we did this because we didn't have enough there weren't enough ways to get headphones to everybody.
Oh,
so we put a click up in these speakers, and we put the speakers as high as we could so that the click wouldn't be heard through the microphones that were down on the floor next to the guitar amp. But you could hear the drums and the click through that PA speaker. So that way we could all stay together and whatnot.
Yeah.
And, then, so that kind of took care of all those. Keyboards, those had a line in. Vocals, we ran those mics in.
So I guess that makes me think about your question of where is that line?
Yeah.
And I think really for me, the line was when I thought about recording direct.
Yeah.
Because that's where it gets complicated.
Yeah.
And you really have to start thinking about it, right?
Yeah.
Like, because now you really do need like those splitters where you can get headphones to everybody.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And we're not going to the point where everyone has their own like mix that they can put it, like forget even that. Just a way that that you can split out enough headphones.
Yeah, everybody can hear something. Like here's one thing that everybody's
there's
going to hear.
Yeah, the general mix is what everybody's getting. You may not hear your instrument great. That's fine. Doesn't matter. You're at least in it there.
Yeah.
And that is where it gets complex. Like at that point, it is kind of you're turning the page to a set of other challenges that hit, and it's different. Like recording, if you haven't done it before, the first time that you'll record direct is a little odd. There's something kind of missing from what you normally are used to leaning into.
Yeah.
And mostly it's that like you can't hide under anything, and it's you can't just mix, your playing can't just mix into the general sound. Like everything gets cut out and kind of displayed.
Yeah. Well, that's a really good point. And I think, if people maybe look back to the beginning of this season, I think we talked about, the album recording that we did over the winter.
Yeah.
And that definitely has an element of that. Like the more like a studio recording it gets, the more like it, the more like that situation it becomes, the more you start to be able to pick out maybe things that, you want to get right in rehearsal or whatever. So, they don't pop out and, really hit people as wrong. And, as you get more complex with the recording, you're going to expose things because they get easier to hear, right? As the recording gets better, any mistake starts to stick out more.
That's right.
Right. And that's the thing that will always be that balance. Like, how do you balance between, this is the live band and this is a pristine, perfect recording. Like, where do you set that dial? I would say, like, if it's something like, you're making an album, you're making a recording that is really for, for people to listen to over and over again. That's where you really want to polish everything.
That's right.
And if you're making something that is a demo that's designed to show, here's what this band is like live, you don't want to really mess with it, because when you do that, you're kind of cheating, right? It's not really what the band sounds like anymore.
That's right.
I'm not saying,
and you're opening up cans of worms that you don't maybe even need to, because that's not what the project is at that point. That's not what that's for. The purpose. I think the way that I really slid into that, like the difference for me was that I would, like, first of all, the interface that I got, it was used, right? It was a Tascam, I think like Tascam 1800 US, I think is what it's called, right? Yep. It's an older unit, but it is USB. It has 16 channels, right, that I can go in.
Yep.
Way more than what I need. And what I was doing ultimately is I was doing the multi-mic thing.
Right.
But also like kind of secretly throwing in everybody direct without them knowing. Well, they knew, but like that wasn't, I did all the work on the back end. I was like, I'll make sure the levels are set right, and then I'm just going to record and I'll have all those direct pieces.
Yes.
Then after the fact, you can kind of blend those. And I would love it, especially for like the bass. I'd have a mic to the bass,
right,
but also direct, and I can kind of balance those two out depending on the sound that I want.
Yeah, which is, I mean, people do that in like big, that's a standard technique that's used in real recordings all the time.
Yeah, and that gives you the control so that you could still stay, like if the focus is like quick and dirty, like I'm just trying to get this demo done.
Right.
It's a nice, like it's a comfortable way to do it, and it gives you more flexibility on the back end as you edit. Right,
for sure. Yeah, and I think for me, I guess I'm still really thinking about that line and like, where do you draw that line? And the line, I think for me, comes when you start having to have headphones for people.
Right.
I think when you do that, now you've crossed the line. Like now that you're getting serious. If you're trying to like,
if the word cans, once cans comes out, that's it. Then you got to throw in the towel. This is the new me.
That's it.
I'm a cans guy.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
No, sorry, go.
For sure. No, I mean, that's really it. I mean, because at that point now you're starting to think about, okay, how do you connect everybody with the sound now that they are kind of listening to it at a distance in their headphones, as opposed to just being in a room, listening and watching each other at rehearsal. Yeah. Right. That change of experience, I think, is where you start to have a new experience as a musician and as a band. Yeah. So, at that point, I think that's where we knew, this, we are doing, it's kind of like live plus, really, is what we did. Yeah. And what we did discover is that as we were doing this live recording like this, we realized that we did not have the amount of sound separation that we needed. Like we didn't have enough equipment to separate out the vocals in a way that was going to be meaningful. Like the vocals were getting all this bleed from the click and the drum. I mean, it sounded awful. Yeah. And so what we ended up doing is deciding amongst ourselves that we would do an instrumental pass and then we're going to do a live vocal pass. Right. And that was in whatever happened. Like no overdubs, no do-overs, like let's get it right. You know what I mean? And so that's how we kind of split it. I don't know that really qualified as a completely live demo for that reason, but we felt like that was honest at least. Yeah. And the vocals ended up being the least difficult part of the whole thing. Right. Honestly, it was easy because we had one person who was singing. There weren't a lot of backing vocals to do. So it was simple. We just, we hit record once, we played the song. We had a good performance of that. We're like, okay, great. We're happy with that. And then we just went and set up a microphone and the singer sang it. We're done. That was it. And we felt like that was fair. I mean, in concept, that's no different than real studio recordings happen. It's just that we kind of constrained ourselves to just doing it live. Like we didn't do any overdubs. We didn't come back and say, oh, I want to do the bass part over again. Right. So, nope. It was down. It was done. Like everybody played together. We're done. Yep. And that was that was kind of the level of challenge that we decided to set for ourselves to be live. Like, even though we could do otherwise, decided, you know what, fair's fair. Right. Yep. And here's what we're going to do. Yeah. Yeah. And you get a certain energy out of it. Yeah. You get a certain thing because then, when you are doing that sort of live demo, it's putting everybody into a place where the pressure is on to get it right. Yeah. And you're giving it everything in that one shot and, it means something. Yeah. Yeah. So I guess the thing we haven't talked too much about is maybe the equipment side of this. I mean, clearly there's a level where you go from maybe the simple setup of just having a few mics, right, and going from there to really like this, more of a live, like a multi-track live studio recording. You could be talking about a lot of channels because think about it, like, for your drums, you may be talking about at least one kick mic, if not more, probably two snare mics on top and bottom, at least top, but maybe top and bottom. Yep. At least one mic for toms, maybe one per tom. Overheads, you may be talking about like a pair of condensers for those. I mean,
we're at 7 right
some
now.
People will do like, some people will do like a dedicated hi-hat mic. I mean, there's like, you can go, but there's also other ways to do it, right? I've seen people do recordings where they have like literally one condenser for the whole drum set. I've seen people do.
I've seen
like
the one
2.
condenser, and we've tried it, and it kind of worked with just one over the behind, over the shoulder. Yeah, yeah. There's a particular way of doing this, and we'll send our listeners, I guess, out to YouTube because there's a couple different names for like the Glyn Johns method. That method we did try it, and there's like a certain like you have to like get a piece of string and it's got to measure out like a certain way or whatever. It looked like we were trying to solve a murder mystery.
Right.
It had like strings everywhere. I'm like, you hold it here.
Which direction did the bullet come from?
Where did I think, based on this blood spatter,
the shooter was above and
was above the tom.
Above and to the right.
Oh no, it was over the snare.
Yeah. But yeah, you can do, there are different methods for doing drums where you may have like just 3 or 4 mics. You may have 10 mics. I mean, it's really up to you how you do that.
Yeah.
And then you need, and what types of mics those are, right? Are going to be, those are going to be, they can be an adjustable level of expense. I've seen, $300 packages where you get like all the mics you need in a little package of, for like a 6-piece set.
Yep. With the clips and everything.
Yeah. All the way up to, there are setups where you can spend, you might have, some mics on that drum set that are like $1,000 a piece.
Right. Hey,
it's crazy.
Yeah. Oh, and if you are going to get into that, like that scope of, I'm going to use my studio space to do some recording and demo recording, I'd highly recommend just keeping your eye on your local Craigslist for the guy the guy or girl that decided to do a studio setup and their spouse said, I'm sick of it, and they have to sell it all.
Yes.
And you'll find the package deals sometimes that they have a hard time.
Person.
You never know. For like $500, you might end up with like everything you need.
Yes.
It might be older equipment, but who cares? Like, you'll
some people kill. Yeah, some people kill for like older equipment.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely.
With the cables and all the stuff that'll nickel, because that's the stuff that gets you. Is that you end up having to spend money on $20 cable here, $20 cable there.
Yeah.
And you quickly are like, oh no, I also need this. I need this connector. So it's like nickel and diming pieces in addition to the interface.
Right. Yeah. When people get into recording, I find like, and I know this is true for me, but I've seen it with other folks too that I know. I know they're the same way, and I know you are too.
Mm-hmm.
Like once you get into the recording aspect on top of everything else, you really become good at bargain hunting because you become very opposed to going out and buying most things new if you can avoid it, right? Let somebody else take the hit on the depreciation,
right?
And then walk away with the same quality of equipment.
Yeah.
So there's that. I mean, there's the whole thing about mic buying. You probably have you need mics for your guitar amps. Those are probably things like maybe a ribbon mic or might be a SM57 or 58. You've got mics for people's vocals that might be dynamics, or they might be condensers if you decide to like split up the recording like my band did. We used a condenser for the vocal passes because we knew it was going to sound better.
Mm-hmm.
So you're talking about, a line for the bass. You probably have mics for each of the guitar amps. So you could be talking about, anywhere between 6 or 7 and 14, 16, maybe more mics.
Yeah.
So you're talking about a much bigger recording setup at that point too. Right. So now we're starting to talk about the point where you're spending more like $3,000 to $5,000 maybe for everything that you need.
Yeah.
And the great thing about it is, though, that I don't think that we're saying you have to do that to make a good demo. It's more like you can grow as you go, right? You learn, you get better at it, and then you can kind of invest in your own. Like you invest in your locker of equipment as you get better at it.
Yeah, if you're going to put money into it, I guess my thought is get the first investment into the interface.
Yeah,
because that's your gateway. Like if you have a 4-channel interface, it's cool. You're going to be able to do a lot more stuff than you would have with the single mic. Like it's going to change your life.
Yeah.
But once you cross over to the next, and you're like, oh, from 4, I'm going to go to 6. At that point, like it might be worth looking at, a 12, 16.
Yep.
If the price difference isn't that much, and that sort of opens up like your ability to grow into it over time and hopefully keep that same interface.
Right. Exactly. So, one thing I guess maybe we'll want to do is give people a couple other maybe technical hints as you're doing this, right? We really haven't talked about the techniques that much. We talked about having, the interface and stuff, but here's also one thing: as you're recording, watch out for the signal level on your inputs, right? This is the thing that I see a lot of people get wrong at the beginning, because they just don't understand what's happening to that signal. In the old days, you used to set signal on analog equipment, so it would come in, pretty much you try and get it, up in that like -6 to -3 dB area, and it would sometimes go over, but that was cool because it like gets a nice, beautiful saturated tone to it, and it could be a round tone. Sometimes you're looking for that. Some people, you'd set it high in order to get a specific kind of tonality. Well, nowadays we're working in digital. Almost everybody is. And you do not want that, right? Because when you cross that line to 0, there is nothing else except distortion and clipping. Yeah. And it starts to sound terrible.
That was a huge lesson for me, because I don't know where I learned it, because I wasn't into recording before, but I just remember like right up to the line, a little bit over the line. Yeah. I don't know. It's like I grew up with that. Yeah. I was born with that, I think.
Yeah. Well, we all looked at, like, when we were little, right? We saw VU meters on things, and they would go like a little over 0 sometimes, and it was cool. It was cool. And in digital, unfortunately, it is not cool at all. Yeah. So
because you can on the edit side, like you can just make that larger.
Right. Yeah. The point is that you want to avoid any possibility that you're going to overshoot and clip or distort your signal coming in. So what you want to do typically is aim for like somewhere your peaks. Well, I would say generally you want the level to be somewhere between like -15 and -20. Right. On what your input is. If it peaks, you probably don't want that peak over anything like -12, -10, something like that. It's not bad if it goes over -15, but what you don't want is you don't want it to be sitting in the yellow or getting close to the red, or, goodness forbid, hitting the red. Yeah. That's terrible. So having it be a little low is not bad. The recording interfaces that we have nowadays are so good compared to things that people were working with 30 years ago that it's okay for the signal to be a little lower, because the machines themselves are so noise free. Right. You can turn that signal up without adding hiss. Yep. In the old days, when you had analog equipment, one of the reasons that you got everything really loud, like get it close up to the meter, like -3, it was great, somewhere in there, because it meant that the signal was going to be it's as far as possible above the noise floor of the equipment. Right. And now the noise is really almost non-existent. Yep. So you don't have to worry about that.
That's right. That's right.
So that's a little bit about signal level that will help while you're, putting these tracks in. I would say one other thing we didn't talk about is sound stuff, right? Like we could do probably a whole episode on treating your room for sound and whatnot. But the main thing is you want to watch out for echoes. And one way to get rid of them is to hang up heavy blankets around your room, because they're irregular and they can suck up sound. Those moving blankets, those quilted moving blankets are awesome for this. Yep. Things that don't work, egg crates. People think they work. They do not work. They can reduce a little bit of the harshness, but they're really poor. Like it's basically like the equivalent of painting over a water stain. It's just not it really doesn't work. Like however, you could go further and you can get some real dense studio foam wedges, the kind that look like kind of a toothy, of a toothy pattern, and you can put them up. These things will help reduce the harshness and bad echoes in a room. What they're not going to do is they will not soundproof a room. So we're not talking about soundproofing. None of this is going to keep the neighbors from hearing.
Right. Totally different. Yeah. This is just treating, sound treating, just watching where the noise is bouncing. And maybe you're recording in because if this is just like to do the demo, maybe you're doing it in a living room where it's like nice. Like there's already a sofa in there. Yeah. There's like maybe books or whatever that are and there's a rug on the floor and it's like sort of eating up any of that echo already. And if it's cool and if it's giving you just enough of that echo or reverb, then then stick with it. That's cool.
Like there was a room that I did a living room concert with a young lady I used to play with some years ago, and her parents had a big house, and we were able to use that for this living room concert, and it was like this gigantic, they had this kind of a vaulted ceiling sort of thing, and it actually sounded amazing.
Totally,
So that was like a good echo. And because it had lots of furnishings and irregular things around, there were bookcases on the wall, and all sorts of things that kind of made the room less like fewer flat surfaces.
It's the irregular pieces.
And we keep saying bookcases, and this is just like, in case anybody out there is wondering why we keep talking about bookcases, it's because bookcases are actually they're a natural diffuser of echoes, because they're irregular. Like the books in them are kind of like different sizes, and they're probably in different depths and like sticking out. Some stick out more and some stick out less. And that's a great way to cut down on some of those bad echoes in the room.
Right? If your drummer is in the corner of a very hard, like a hard corner, do something about the corner too. Throw something in there to break that up. Because a lot of times we do put the drummer in the corner. We don't put baby in the corner, but we put the drummer in the corner
every time.
Every time.
Yeah, it's like putting a like a blanket or some sort of backdrop behind them. That kind of curves and makes it a kind of an irregular surface is going to help quite a bit. Like you can, there are lots of things you can do, with drums, in fact, to kind of get good recordings out of bad spaces, like doing more close miking, right? If your room sounds really bad, you can sometimes get around that by close miking everything, as opposed to like using like one or two condensers far away. Use more mics and mic everything up close. That's right. It's going to be more work when you mix it, but you can get better sounds out of the drums that way.
Exactly.
So that's a nice thing to do. And I'd say, the last thing is, as you get more complex like this, right, leave time to mix it, because the more complex the recording process becomes, the more you're going to end up wanting to do in the mix to kind of bring the power back. It sounds one way to you when you're in the room and everybody's playing out loud, and it's going to sound very different when you have those things coming into mics. You're going to have to listen to the track and then try and get it more to a point where it sounds like what you wanted it to sound like.
Yeah. And each track, like the more tracks that you're adding to this recording, it means each one you have to dedicate time and mix each one individually, set the right EQs, put the right effects and all of that.
So, absolutely.
And it's time. It's a learning curve.
Yeah, for sure. And I guess, one other point that we didn't hit, there are a number of live mixers out there these days. You've got one, I've got one. There's you got the QSCs, you've got the Behringers, you've got the Line 6s, you've got the PreSonus ones, right? There are all sorts of mixers out there nowadays where you can actually, bring one to a show and you can literally track your band live, as long as you are capturing everything that's going on stage. As long as it's going into the mixer somewhere, you will be able to get your tracks that way.
That's right.
I've done that a number of times where I've recorded, performances from bands that I was playing in, and I can literally take the card. It's one that uses SD card, just like you were saying. Pull that into a box, and I can remix the whole show in Pro Tools after that. And that's a great way to go. And again, it takes some time to learn how to do that, but there are boatloads of videos out there on the internet, like on YouTube, where you can learn the art of doing that, that kind of work. And again, it's all, part of your toolbox. So I think our key is, you don't have to shoot for the moon the first time. Start small. And as you gain more experience and as you get better at it, kind of work your way up.
That's right.
And ultimately you'll find out that doing demos are actually, it's fun, it's easy, and we've got plenty of ways you can share it now, like on SoundCloud or
That's right.
or YouTube or whatever,
Yep.
and get it out in front of those venue owners that way, right?
Yep.
I find very few of them nowadays want CDs anymore, right?
Yeah.
Because
they want
they're just coasters now,
Right.
They're just like, where's your SoundCloud, where's your YouTube or whatever.
Yeah. And because it has to be attached to whatever you're marketing.
Yeah.
Because if you're doing a demo, that means you need something that you're giving them, and it's usually either like a website or a Facebook page,
right,
or something along those lines.
Yes, that's a good point. Like, make sure that it's accessible from there. Yeah, absolutely. Well, that seems like a pretty good place to stop, I guess. I mean, we went all the way from stick one mic in a room to practically making a live album.
That's right. Because the only difference at that point, once you're at that level and you've got all the equipment. The only difference between you and that master studio recorder is just time and experience.
And money. And there's
money.
Some money involved.
There's a little bit of money too. Yeah.
But it's all it's just a matter of degree at that point.
Right.
Well, we wish you guys happy recording, and we hope that you'll be able to put some of this to use in making demos of your band.
That's right.
Let us know how this works out for you. Let us know what your experience has been doing small demos or maybe larger demos or other kind of live recording. Drop us a line. You can reach us at the website, which is practicalbass.com. You can email us at podcast@practicalbass.com. And if you enjoyed what you heard here, we hope that you will subscribe to the podcast. It's very easy to do. You can find us on the podcasts app on your iPhone or on iTunes on your Mac OS device. You can find us on Stitcher Radio on any platform, on Google Play Music on any platform. Just look for Practical Bass. And once the friendly black and white Practical Bass logo comes up, click the subscribe button. You'll get a fresh episode delivered to you each week, completely for free. We do not charge for this. We do not believe in it. And we hope that you enjoy the knowledge that we hope we are passing on here, and that you will share it with your friends. You share it with fellow bass players, fellow musicians, bandmates, and we hope that it will help you take your gigs and gear to the next level. And I guess until next time, I'm Paul Fields.
I'm Dave Guzman.
And this has been Practical Bass.
Thanks for listening.
But who cares, because we're practical bassing it today.
Bassing out.